Halfland, an ahistorical prehistory. The Battle of Silverferry. In the 129th year of the Common Reckoning, Gunnlaugh, the king of the Skeldings, marched from Great Hall to make war upon Fulbert, who had declared himself to be the Warden of Overwater, a title that Gunnlaugh wished to bestow upon his brother, Osfrid. The lower reaches of the Silver Stream were broad, too broad to be spanned by a bridge, but there was a ferry across the river, and it was by this ferry, the Silver Ferry, that Gunnlaugh and his host crossed into the territory of Overwater, and it was here that Fulbert was waiting for them. Fulbert had raised a levy army of approximately 750 men. Of these, 150 were armoured cavalry. There were some 300 spearmen with shields, some of whom were armoured, and some 300 light infantry, which Fulbert split into three groups: archers, slingers, and javelineers. Gunnlaugh's force was similar in size and composition to that of Fulbert. The core of the army was the king's spearmen, the remainder being composed of the retinues of the captains. These retinues were largely composed of armoured spearmen and archers. The captains themselves, along with their leading retainers, fought as armoured cavalry. The ferry landed at a jetty next to the ferryman's hut. From here, meadows, broken only by occasional clumps of trees, rose gently up to a ridge that overlooked the river. Fulbert had drawn up his forces atop this ridge. In the centre he placed his spearmen, with a protecting screen of javelineers to their front. The slingers were stationed on the right flank. Fulbert placed his cavalry to the left of the spearmen and slightly behind them. The archers took up a position on the far left. As Gunnlaugh disembarked from the ferry, he could see the grim ranks of Fulbert's men on the crest above, watching him. But Fulbert made no attempt to intervene as Gunnlaugh's men were ferried across the Silver Stream and arrayed along the river, with the spearmen in the centre, the cavalry behind, and a group of archers on each flank. It was now noon. Gunnlaugh waited for Fulbert to make a move. The afternoon drew on, and still Fulbert's troops watched, motionless. Tired of waiting, Gunnlaugh ordered a general advance, and the line of his troops slowly moved forward. On Gunnlaugh's left, the advancing archers were liberally pelted with slingshot by the slingers on the slopes above them, opening gaps in the archers' ranks. Still the archers advanced, until the slingers were in range of their bows. The archers halted, and loosed volley after volley of arrows at the slingers, who suffered grievously. Seeing their discomfiture, Gunnlaugh ordered his cavalry to advance toward them, hoping to turn his opponent's right flank. To the right of the cavalry, in the centre of the line, Gunnlaugh's spearmen marched stoically forward. But this brought them within range of Fulbert's archers, who showered them with arrows, inflicting significant casualties. Gunnlaugh responded by pushing the archers on his right further forward, into a position from where they could engage Fulbert's archers, and a fierce exchange of arrows ensued. On his left flank, Gunnlaugh's cavalry advanced up the ridge, menacing Fulbert's remaining slingers. Gunnlaugh ordered the archers on his left flank to move toward the centre, to drive away the javelineers screening Fulbert's spearmen. The javelineers responded by surging toward the archers, attempting to close to javelin range, and Fulbert ordered his cavalry to move along the ridge to their right, passing behind his spearmen into a position where they could threaten the flank of Gunnlaugh's advancing horsemen. The javelineers' foray forward was successful. Several of Gunnlaugh's archers fell, pierced by hard-hurled javelins, and javelineer shields provided protection from the arrows loosed in response. The javeliniers fell back to their initial position. Fulbert's cavalry manoeuvres also proved successful. Faced by the threat of Fulbert's cavalry, Gunnlaug's cavalry pulled back, and, having achieved their purpose, Fulbert's cavalry also withdrew, well out of the range of Gunnlaug's archers. All this time the archers on Gunnlaug's right had continued to exchange arrows with their counterparts on Fulbert's left, and Fulbert's archers had the better of it. Concerned that the victorious archers would once more target his spearmen with their arrows, Gunnlaug ordered those spearmen to advance and close with the foes lining the ridge above them. Simultaneously he urged the horsemen on his left forward once more, intending to ride down the slingers, sweep aside Fulbert's cavalry, and combine with the advancing spearmen to annihilate Fulbert's centre, thus winning the battle at one stroke. Now, this was a bold and decisive plan, and on another day it might well have been successful. But not on this day. As Gunnlaug's cavalry thundered toward the remaining slingers atop the hill, a well-directed volley of slingshot brought the horses of many of the leading captains down, and thus rendered leaderless, the cavalry charge stalled. Horsemen milled about in confusion under a continuing hail of slingshot. And neither did Gunnlaug have any success in the centre. As his spearmen laboured up the ridge, Fulbert's javeliniers used those weapons to good effect, thinning the numbers of the spearmen and breaking up their formation. Having done their work, the javeliniers then fell back through the ranks of Fulbert's spearmen stationed behind them. Those of Gunnlaug's men who, tired and disorganised, reached the top of the ridge, therefore found themselves faced by a tightly formed formation of fresh foes who fell on them ferociously. Even as Gunnlaug's centre was being cut to shreds, Fulbert unleashed his cavalry, charging into Gunnlaug's stalled horsemen, who broke and fled. Fulbert's cavalry then rode over Gunnlaug's archers, killing many of them and scattering the rest. Gunnlaug stood at the foot of the ridge, his few surviving spearmen around him, and prepared to die a hero's death as Fulbert's cavalry thundered toward him. But he was spared this fate. A handful of Gunnlaug's scattered archers rallied themselves sufficiently to loose a ragged volley of arrows at the charging cavalry, driving some of them back and causing the remainder to momentarily cease their advance. Observing this, some of Gunnlaug's cavalry were emboldened to desist from their headlong flight, and wheeled their horses through 180 degrees, countercharging into Fulbert's hesitating horsemen. These actions were not sufficient to win the day for Gunnlaug. Far from it. But they did stall the general advance of Fulbert's forces, buying Gunnlaug enough time to make an orderly retreat. And so, as the sun set, Gunnlaug and Osfrid re-embarked upon the ferry and recrossed the Silver Stream, leaving Fulbert as the uncontested and victorious Warden of Overwater. Thus ended the Battle of Silverferry.